Okay, hello and welcome, Fish here with another DCS video. This video we're going to look at the approach plate that we use for Anderson, which is our training map in VCAW 99, the Virtual Carrier Air Wing, the Red Cox. So I'm not an expert on these charts, so I'm just going to focus on the important bits that we need for this approach. And there are some similarities. There's some parts of it that will be similar to our Case 1 approach and our Case 3 approach. For instance, the arc that we'll be traversing is going to be similar to the arc that we do in Case 3. And the overhead is going to be very similar to the overhead that we do in Case 1. So we look at the chart here. The most important feature on the chart is the Anderson Channel 54 TACAN fix, because we can see it's a TACAN chart here. And it's also repeated up here in the top left-hand corner, Channel 54. So we're going to need to set that up in our aircraft. Down below it here, the rest of it we don't need to worry about for the moment. Down below it here, we need to put in 126.2 for our primary radio. And this is the radio we will be using to talk to the tower. If we come down into the main portion, the starting point of the chart for us is going to be this initial fix called ROOSTER. And ROOSTER has got three characteristics. It's got an altitude, a distance, and it's got a radial from Channel 54. Notice it doesn't have a latitude or longitude, so we can't thumb it in to our nav points and use that to directly approach the fix. So we've got to do it by reference, and the way I do it is I'll get on to radial 051. So what we need to do that is we need to approach close to the radial and take a left turn, make sure we're outside the arc of the circle, intercept the radial 051, turn in a right turn, and then turn right again at the ROOSTER fix. So when we turn onto the arc, you can see we've got an altitude setting of 2,500. So we should be setting ourselves from 3,000 that we approach on down to 2,500. When we get close, before we get too far into the arc, what we need to do is we need to set our heading, our course knob. We need to be setting our course on to 060. So we start by setting our course to the radial 051, and a bit like the BRC, we then intercept that line, and then we intercept that line pointing outwards, and then when we get on the arc, we need to switch that over to 060, and we need to also intercept that line on the inbound course. Notice the difference between the radial 051 is pointing away from the TACAN, and our 060 is our course line, is pointing to the radial. Now another small feature of this chart is that the actual runway heading is about 067 and not 060. So we're going to be slightly offset when we come in on the 060 line. So when we get to this part of the approach, before we turn in, you can see we've got a bit more detail about that down in the bottom panel here. So we're down at Angels 25 here at 17 miles. We turn in, and then we are on 060 all the way. And what we need to do is drop down to Angels 2 before 6.6 miles. Once we hit 6.6 miles, it's a fix called COMA. And at COMA, what we can do is we can then do a visual. We should have visual on the runways when we hit COMA. And so we can call in for an overhead. Now ignore this one for the overhead, the 2000 MSL. What we're going to be looking at for the overhead, we're going to be looking at 1000 AGL, which is above ground level, so above the threshold. And the way we calculate that, because we're not going to be using a radar altimeter, because because of the undulating nature of the ground below us, unlike when we're on the deck, on the carrier, where it's all sea, it's going to be going up and down, and that's not good for us. So we're going to be in barometric mode. And so we need to know what altitude we're looking for to give us 1,000 over the threshold. And the way we do that is we look at this item on the top here called TDSE, which is 557 feet above sea level. So we add that to our required 1,000 feet above the ground, and we end up with approximately 1,600. So we're going to do this overhead brake at 1,600 barometric. We should be really making sure that our barometric altimeter is set correctly, but I'm assuming that that's the case. We don't really have QFE and QNH and QNE in this sim. It's not simulated very well. So what we'll be doing is we'll be looking for 1,600, and also we'll be looking for 350 knots in the brake. So the brake over the runway, it'll be about halfway down, and it's very similar to the case 1 brake. We'll be calling it a tower. When we turn onto the base leg, we'll be calling right base. And then when we're on final, we'll be calling short final. When we have nose down, we're going to call that in. And when we're exiting the active, we're going to call in exiting active onto whatever taxi we were moving on to. So that's pretty much it. So I'm going to switch this off, and we're going to follow the knee board now as we start to do the approach. Okay, we're in the pit now, and I'm going to configure our aircraft for this approach. So first job is to switch our TACAN on and find out where we are relative to Anderson. So it's 5-4. Enter, and I'm going to set my screens, and I'm going to set TACAN for that. So we're 27 miles from UAM, and I'm going to set my course line to be 051. And we're going to start coming down in altitude, dropping back a little bit in our speed. I'm going to set our radio to 126.2. And I'm going to call it in. Anderson approach 312, single shift F18, inbound from your west. Requesting overhead from COMA. Okay, we're 22 miles now. What we have to make sure we don't do is you don't go inside the 17-mile limit there. So we're going to be taking a left turn, skirt around, and going to intercept the 051 radial to the northeast there, and then we're going to be tracking back southwest to intercept Rooster. So we need to be dropping down in altitude now, and I'm going to turn left to put that radial to go parallel to that radial, so I'm going to roll out on 051. We're currently 19 miles, so 051 is good. And
altitude
051, so that radial doesn't look correct. 051, enter, that's more like it. Okay, we're down to 3,600, drop back a little bit in the speed, and I'm going to level up. So I'm going to set up our heading bug for the 051, and I'm going to go into autopilot mode. It'll just free us up a little bit. Okay, so we're 17.6 miles. probably could afford to be a little bit further away from that intercept. But as soon as we get past the 9 o'clock position, we're pretty good. That number will go up. So let's just do our landing checks here. Launch bars up. Hook bypassed. Carrier. Lights off at the moment. We'll do that when we have put our gear down. Anti-skid is going to be on because we're on land. Flaps is off at the moment. The hook is up. And everything else looks good. We climbed up a little bit in speed, but we don't have any speed restrictions at this phase of the approach. So, but I'm going to set it and box it at 350. We're going to maintain 350 for the rest of the approach. Let's drop down a little bit in altitude. Set ourselves up for Angels Tree. Again, we're well within restrictions at the moment once we're above 2,600 over here. Yeah, within 25 miles. We're going to set our altitude warning for 2500, which is what we'd be doing on the arc. We can start turning in now. Our distance has increased there. So we're well outside the 17, but we do need turning room in order to get onto the radial. Remember, we're inbound on that radial. And then we take the right turn when we hit 17 miles. So we'll be rolling out on 231. And we are 9.6 miles from that radial. I find it easier to do a 90-degree intercept for something like this, particularly when you're close in, so you've got good distance to settle in for the next fix. Okay, 6 miles now. Okay, down to 3 miles now. Let's start turning. Try not to overshoot this mark. Rose a little bit in altitude, but we're okay. Again, our only restrictions are that we're at 3,000 at this fix. Okay, just roll out a little bit to get a better intercept there. As soon as that jet gets to the center, and that looks good enough to me. So on to 231. So we're at 20 miles now. Didn't leave us much space to do that maneuver. So 19 miles. We're going to come down to 17 miles. So it's a right turn now. So that's right turn. I'm watching that 18 miles now coming down. So we're pulling hard. 17.9, 17.8, 17.7. Actually slow it down now. 17.6. So we're in good shape. and we can start coming down in altitude. So we need to wind it up a little bit to bring that down from 17 miles. Speed is drifted up. I can reset the speed when we're settled. Okay, there's our altitude now. And 17.4. Don't have to be bang on 17. Once we keep course correcting, if we start drifting away. So I'm going to come down and need to just unwind a little bit now. Going to come down and that looks good to me. And what I use is when that little triangle is just beside the 0 there, is what I try and keep that on when I'm at the correct distance, and that will keep me on a nice arc. So just recheck reverse altitude. Okay, altitude is there, 32500, and bring our speed back a little bit. And set our auto throttle again. So finally on this, we're down at our correct altitude, as you can see there, 2500. We're on the arc, and we're going to set up for our 060 course line.
Altitude.
So 0.
Altitude.
And you can see the benefit of having the altitude warning on the arc. So 060. Enter that, and we'll cross check on that. That's it there, 060. Altitude's fallen off just a little bit. Just requires a lot of concentration to maintain good position on the arc. Gonna reset our speed back a bit. Down to 3.7 now. So again, at the 2 mile mark, we're going to take a turn onto that line. Gone up to 17.4. Okay, we're going to turn on now. Might have overshot this a little bit, so I'm going to do a hard pull. Try and catch it. Okay, so we're 060. I'm pretty much on that line. Now we need to be dropping down. You can see our last phase is down to Angel's Tooth.
Altitude. Altitude.
And then the final one is down to 1600 feet. We've got visual on the runway now. We're 14 miles. Anderson, ground 312, requesting overhead brake. Okay, so I'm going to do a left offset now. We've got good visual on the runway. I'm going to come down to 1600. Our speed is good. And remember the 06 right we're looking for here. So I'm going to check right for that. Just give us a little bit of an offset. And that's looking good. 1690, 1650 and 1600. So, and we can see it's 065 is what we're at for this runway. Dropped a little bit in altitude. Unbox my speed. 312 is in the brake. Okay, throttle to idle. 2.5G pull. So 245 is what our rollout is going to be. Maintaining my 1600 in the altitude. Coming up to 24, 24, 24, 24, 24, 5. Okay, now it's 30 up. Gear and maintain this altitude, unlike on the boat where we would be dropping down, because we need to have good visibility over any of the land and obstacles that may be in our way here. 0245. So 1.2. Okay, checking our wing. That's a good lineup now. 312 for right base. Now I think we have a decent lineup now. I need to just be watching my on speed. Yeah, we've plenty of turning room here. 312 short final. Landing lights are on. Two wheels down. Okay, our brakes out. Nice thing about Anderson is we've got plenty of landing space. It's a nice long runway. Okay, wheel brakes. Slow us down. Okay, air brakes off. Flaps up. 302 exiting active to the right on taxiway hotel. Okay, so that's pretty much the approach as I understand it to be. I hope you found this useful, and please feel free to comment, like, dislike and subscribe. And until the next time, this is Fish Out.